Welcome, everybody. My name is Bert Gordijn, and I'm Professor of Ethics at Dublin City University in Ireland. I will share this last session, and we will mainly focus on case studies and methods for case analysis, as we will zoom in on scenarios in a session tomorrow. So let me introduce the first speaker. Kelly Laas is a librarian and information researcher at the Center for the Study in Ethics in the Professions at the Illinois Institute of Technology. She has supervised quite a number of projects relating to the development of online ethics resources and collections. She was also involved in developing bibliographies and other materials for the Online Ethics Center, as well as in developing the Ethics Education Library, an online database of articles, syllabi, ethics case studies, and best practices of how to integrate ethics into existing technical courses and workshops. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you so much. So I have worked, as Bert said, pretty extensively on developing case studies and some different repositories of case studies. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the case study method in teaching research ethics, and talk a little bit about kind of case types, how they're useful in different situations, some of the goals of the case study method, and some methods of integrating cases, and also invite people who are interested to work with me on maybe developing some new cases in this field if you are interested. So, sorry, I think I'm looking at the wrong one. Here we are. So just a very brief history of case studies in teaching ethics. It really started in the disciplines of law and medicine. In the US, the Harvard published a lot of some of the first cases. These were business cases that were very rich in detail, based on real life, and useful in terms of students looking to really dig into this information. In philosophy, again, there's a very long tradition of using examples or scenarios to illustrate more abstract points. These tend to be really short cases with very few details. You saw these two fields merge in the area of medical ethics a lot in the 1960s, where philosophers started talking with doctors. They used these kind of patient histories as case studies and wanted to bring them into their classroom. So they simplified the cases, made a lot of the terminology more easier to understand for students without medical backgrounds. And the case study method has grown in popularity to help illustrate how ethical issues come up in the kind of applied ethics fields. So what makes a good case study? I've been working with cases for 15 years now, and I've seen some really great ones and some ones that are a little less good. So, and they're useful in different situations. So I think pretty obviously length is very important to think about in terms of timing, the level of students or researchers you're working with, and the depth of discussion you're looking to engage them in. For my more introductory sessions with undergraduate students, I tend to do really short cases. They're usually only a paragraph, and I'm trying to reinforce certain points. With graduate student levels or practice researchers, I use much longer cases that are really rich in detail. Perspective can be useful too. Single perspective really helps students kind of go directly to the ethical questions. Multi-perspective cases can lead to much richer discussions where students can look at different stakeholder viewpoints and things like that. The narrative, when looking at cases, it should be structured in a way in which students can find the kind of relevant details and facts they need in the case without having to go outside in a lot of cases. So they're not being overwhelmed, but they need enough detail, and the ethical issue in the case has to be nuanced enough that there can be different answers. Sometimes I'll be given cases by researchers. I'm like, I like to use this, and it's very obvious what the answer is. And so there's not much for the realm of discussion. For goals, specifically for the case study teaching method, we're really looking to increase moral sensitivity and moral imagination. So that ability for students to kind of recognize ethical issues quickly and use their imagination to think about, well, what are some different ways we can approach this this question in a useful way. Obviously, to increase ethical knowledge, it may be of decision-making frameworks you want to integrate, which I know Peter will talk about. It might be resources or people. It might be laws and regulations, guidelines, or what I think is really important, terminology, because we talk about a lot in my teaching of using ethical scripts. So getting students to develop that ease of speaking where they can communicate their ideas to people using terminology that really relates to the ethical issues at hand. And then the hardest to measure is enhancing ethical willpower. Going through these cases, I think, helps them practice these skills and hopefully makes them comfortable enough that they'll raise questions and act rather than freeze when in a real life situation. And I think this is where case study method really is useful, because it kind of puts all these skills we've been talking about into work. So the types of cases that I've used a lot, we talked about short versus long. I think one that's important is, quote, disaster versus exemplar. I do a lot of work in engineering ethics as well, and even in research ethics. A lot of the cases we use tend to go when things go slightly wrong. And I think it's useful to bring in cases where things go right, where you see someone looking at a problem, making a decision, and they do most of the right things. So it kind of gives the students a model of, this is how things can really turn out potentially well, or at least better, when people act in a given way. So using a mixture of cases, I think, is useful in that sense. Narrative versus dialogue. I really like using dialogue-based cases in my teaching. The students, I often ask them to do role play, which I know they hate, but it's really useful in a lot of cases because it really mirrors what happens in real life. And they get that practice again of using scripts and developing that terminology and knowledge. You versus they. In simple classes and directed classes, I tend to do cases where the students are in the hot seat and it's, obvious, they're the ones making the decision. In cases with more viewpoints, you get to have them look at different stakeholder viewpoints and maybe take the role of an administrator or someone else, and they get kind of develop a better understanding of the different perspectives in the case. Single versus multi-stage cases. So in some cases, you may want a case that builds slowly over time. So we've used some great ones either in single sessions or in multi-sessions, where the students read a case study I've developed from a real life scenario, and then we build on that over time. And as an event builds, things get more complex. The students get some practice. So that can be really, really powerful. Then also top versus down is giving the people we're working with the ability to think about, what is the viewpoint from the person at the very bottom of our organization, potentially helping solving an ethical issue, versus the top. So you can look at different, different perspectives that can be really useful. So how do you use cases? Oftentimes, we use guided discussions. I know there's a lot of great teaching guides on the Embassy for Good Science. And you may use a decision-making framework and you walk through analysis of the case. I also favor something that I've been involved with a lot called the Ethics Bowl, which is a debate style competition where teams of students, I've actually done this with teachers or researchers, where they get a case, they read it, they discuss it in their group, and then they go into a debate style competition where the sides aren't assigned a position on the case, but the discussion should mirror all the good points of a philosophical discussion, where they ask questions, challenge people's viewpoints, have you considered X, Y, or Z? And it really is a rich and fun way to kind of get students thinking. And then we do a follow-up discussion. You can use multimedia. I know there's some ones like choose your own adventure type, like the lab. I've also pulled in movies like Gattaca, books, television shows, short stories, and those can be really powerful for students as well. I've done role play cases, and there's a lot of really good ones on the Online Ethics Center specifically, where students are given kind of the background of their character, some beginning dialogue, and then the students are asked to ad-lib what may potentially happen in this scenario in the research environment or wherever they are. And they play it out, and then we discuss what happened, either with the students or with the students who have kind of been watching as an audience. And it's really useful. The students are really incredible at how they adapt and answer things, and it's useful in that sense. And then also living cases, which I talked a little bit about. So cases based on real life ongoing news stories, where you talk about a news event that happened maybe in the recent past, or maybe it's going now, and the students do research, and they may kind of build upon that. So that can be really useful in a more kind of ongoing course-like situation to get students kind of thinking about these issues. So where do we find cases? Obviously, the Embassy of Good Science, which we've talked a lot about today. There's some amazing stuff there. I've kind of just dug in, but I'm looking forward to learning more about it. The Online Ethics Center, which is a US collection of case studies in research ethics from all areas of STEM. We have some legacy cases. We have a lot of really good new stuff coming up, and we're always looking to get new cases for our collection, especially from an international perspective. So please think about us. There's the Ethics Education Library, which has a lot of this ethics bowl cases I've talked about and some other ones from other organizations. And then also there's a small but really good collection from the National Center for Case Study Teaching and Science. These are really great cases for looking at issues of emerging technologies. Also, you can look in science publications. I look a lot at some of the kind of editorials, or I think Science Magazine has a Science Careers where I found some really great cases for looking at kind of issues faced by students in the lab, or you can write your own. So this is my contact information. I want to thank Dr. Michael Davis, who is a longtime colleague of mine, who's done a lot of work in this area. And if you're interested in following up with me or writing a case together, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Let me introduce the next speaker now. Péter Kakuk is Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Ethics and Law in Biomedicine in the Central European University in Budapest, Hungary. And he also works as a consultant of the Health Ethics and Governance Unit of the WHO. He is president of the European Society for Philosophy of Medicine and Healthcare. And he has participated in a variety of EU projects, amongst them the EnTIRE project. Péter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bert. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my slides?
We can.
Cool. So my topic will be methods for case analysis in the context of research ethics and integrity. And I'd like to present a skeleton of the work that we done in the Work Package 5 group in the EnTIRE project. We had a task to develop a systematic collection of cases as a contact for the embassy, methods for case analysis, and showcase these methods and develop a set of scenarios. So first, we collected research ethics and research integrity cases across the whole spectrum of RRI issues and research areas. We tagged and categorized these cases to enhance the indexing and retrievability of cases in the platform, aggregated and applied case analysis methods suitable for the ethical analysis of research ethics and research integrity cases, and we built a comprehensive set of research ethics and research integrity scenarios that will be discussed tomorrow. We also participate in an assessment of the acceptability and usability of the platform with various stakeholders. So first, how we collected cases and case analysis methods. First, we collected cases in a systematic review. We collected cases from research ethics and research integrity committees, from professional regulators, from media outlets. We searched the blogosphere. We reviewed the gray literature, and we done a scoping review of the academic literature featuring research ethics and research integrity cases. You can see the result of this publication at the right part of the slide. And as a result of all these searches, currently on the Embassy of Good Science, we made available 439 tagged cases. So it's an enormous amount of cases that you can use in the Embassy. There are brief description of these cases, and the original source is there, so you can go directly to the web page where we found the cases, and you can search very specific cases that you're looking for example, in an educational setting that you would like to use a specific case. According to our scoping review, one of the major one of the major results of this review was that there's a quite imbalance how in academic literature cases are represented. Mostly the cases are coming from the US and from the UK. Mostly cases are focusing on falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, so the great Bronx of integrity breaches. And mostly cases are focusing on specific disciplines in the natural sciences and biomedical sciences. So a lot of disciplines are not really represented in case discussions. So searching for case deliberation methods and case analysis, our goal was to find user-friendly, accessible methods for analyzing research ethics and research integrity cases that can be appropriated by all users without prior philosophical knowledge in local context. So it was really important for us to find easy-to-use tools. For this, we set up two criteria in our search. One, that this method should have a procedural step-by-step framework, such as a checklist or flowchart that any user can follow without prior philosophical knowledge for the purpose of analyzing research ethics and integrity cases. And the second criteria was that it should have a substantive aspect that is incorporated within this procedural framework in order to supply the normative standards for analyzing research ethics and research integrity cases. So this was our first criteria. We did a systematic review of case analysis methods with Google search with academic databases like EnTIRE and PubMed and others. And we also done an expert survey within the EnTIRE and Virtue Consortium members. And as a result, we identified few case analysis methods. These case analysis methods can be seen here. And as you see, there are very few case analysis methods that we could find during our search. And one reason for this, that there are very few case analysis methods probably globally used specifically for research ethics and integrity. So what we tried to widen up this search, and we included all the methods that are used in applied ethics and medical ethics that can potentially be used for research ethics and integrity. And we also developed a showcasing regarding these methods. So as a demonstration how it can work in real settings. So for example, if you go now to the Embedded with Science, you would see the four-quadrant approach, a method for analyzing case and research ethics and integrity, where you will find a description of this method, how it works in a step-by-step manner. So for example, a trainee can easily appropriate this method and use it for a given case. And we also developed for every case analysis method that we identified during our search, a demonstration, and we demonstrated how these methods work on real-life cases. For example, a four-quadrant approach was demonstrated in a Japanese fraud case related to an archaeologist back in 2000 something. This was one of the case analysis method that we worked on in detail, and we would like to work on in the future. This is an adaptation of a very often used case analysis method in clinical ethics. It was developed by Johnson and his colleague. Our goal was to develop an easy-use tool with a clear procedure for case analysis in educational settings. The four-quadrant method is a three-stage method. First, a group of people or an individual assesses the initial perception regarding the case. And then the second stage is about the 4 quadrants or the 4 topics. That is the analytic steps to collect all the relevant details, the contextual features, the relevant facts, and courses of action related to the case. And stage 3 is casuistic reasoning, just focusing on the justificatory character of the case. So we should identify what is at issue, where is the conflict, what is the case of, what do we know about other cases like this one, and how is this present case similar to the paradigm case. So this is would be a kind of adaptation of already existing case analysis method that we will do version 3. Now it's version 2, and we already are piloting of this method. This is one of the methods that are available on the embassy, but there are other 6. These methods are just examples in the embassy, and it would be very good that it would invite others to upload their case analysis tools, and very specific case analysis tools would be developed in the embassy in the future. Thank you for your attention, and I would also like to thank my work package colleagues, Jonathan, Bert, Mohammed, and Anna and Søren, that worked a lot on these collection of materials and developing these case analysis tools. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So let us start with the Q&A. And Kelly, if you could also turn on your camera. There is one bit more technical question. Anonymous attendee asks, where are the case analysis methods on the embassy? If you go to training and then to individual exercises, you will find the 6 case analysis methods. So, Kelly, you mentioned some goals and objectives of teaching by using case studies. Mm-hmm. You can also think, in general, I would think that you want to improve ethical decision making, and then if you break that down a little bit, you can distinguish recognizing moral issues, making moral judgments, but also establishing moral intent and engaging in moral behavior. And arguably the last 2 are more difficult to achieve in teaching than the first. But are you aware of any empirical research in this regard, or is the kind of evidence mainly anecdotal?
There is a lot of research on assessment going on right now, also being funded by the National Science Foundation, looking at what we're in ethics education, what we're actually achieving. I can't pull it off the top of my head, but I'd be more than happy to get back to you on that question. There is empirical research, but I haven't dug into it in recent months, is the answer. But I will get back to you on that.
Peter, do you know anything about, are you aware of empirical research in this regard, or?
No, I haven't heard about any such specific research.
Peter, how important is it to use methods for case analysis when discussing case studies? It may be a no-brainer, but what is the importance? What is the added value of using a method?
I can imagine 2 settings. One is where, for example, committees or group of people need to make a decision. So in these situations, these methods give a good structure for the discussion. So it can have gives you an organized way of not getting lost in the details of the case and a lot of arguments and the little different perspectives that the participants are suggesting. So it's organizational structure. And in the other setting, educational setting, I think if anybody was working with students, for example, that were not really motivated in the topic, because probably this is not their primary interest, usually it's very hard them to get a real engagement in the issue or in the questions. So if you give them a tool that's easily used, they are very easily engaged in the topic. And if you choose a good case for that audience, I really enjoyed using case analysis methods. For example, the 4-quadrant method for biomedical students was I really enjoyed that because it was a really good engagement tool.
Kelly, what is your experience with the use of methods in teaching?
I think it's imperative because I mean, I do a lot of work with undergraduate students who are often don't really have a background in philosophy or that type of decision making, and when they're faced with complex problems that don't have an obvious answer, you tend to freeze. And I think these case study analysis give people a framework to think through things in a logical step-by-step fashion, and I think it helps them feel more comfortable in dealing with complex issues with lots of gray areas and lots of facts that may not be as solid as they're used to. And it's really imperative to use something like this in teaching the case study method.
Right. By the way, in the Q&A, Elizabeth Heitman comes up with the reference in regard to research on assessment. So that is interesting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was what I was thinking of.
Peter, so we found that there are hardly any, and perhaps none, case analysis methods specifically focused on research ethics and research integrity. How come, do you think? And is there a need for such methods specifically focused on research integrity? Because we don't seem to have them at the moment.
I would say that we didn't find it. There might be some really well-developed methods, but probably these are not really popularized or not really easy to access them. The other thing that I would mention that we were specifically looking for 2 criteria: easy accessibility and easy use. And we needed a method that have using substantive standards, normative standards also. And with this variation, it's really narrowing down what we were looking for. So we might find different tools, but if we really would like to find something that jointly uses these 2 features, we are probably wouldn't find many globally. We didn't find one, but before we were thinking about developing, and that's why we at the end decided to upload what we found as examples, because people might come and start to use them and start to modify a little bit and adapt it to those settings like research ethics and integrity context. And this would be great.
I have a question from Guy, and he's asking if you think about case analysis methods, should they only be procedural, stipulating the different steps in the discussion, or could they also be more normative, so guiding more sort of in a substantial normative direction?
Kelly, or I?
If you'd like to take it, Peter, go ahead.
Yep. Yes, it can be more normative, but if we are really widening up the users, and we really would like people who do not have substantive experiences in philosophical theories and normative theories, then the procedural aspects, it really makes things easier to use as a trainee and also as a participant. If you're given a very clear structure, you know what steps you are following and what's going on around it, then it probably supports your engagement. You know what's going on in that setting.
Kelly, you mentioned different kinds of cases, multimedia, role play, real life cases. Could you say a bit more from your experience about the advantages and disadvantages of their use in education?
I mean, I think the approach you take really depends on the engagement of the students as well. I've used a lot of the role play cases when I have students who are a little shy about talking because it forces them to talk. And I think it's those type of really engaged active learning approaches really give students the ability to practice what they're doing. In more philosophical classes where students feel uncomfortable in some cases is doing that type of thing, I've taken more of a use some of the more of the narrative form cases, more of the longer cases, because we'll get in some really good discussion and the students are used to this type of discussion and engagement. But when you're dealing with students who are maybe more practice-based, who haven't had a background in ethics, some of these more engaged approaches can be really useful in that sense, to kind of get them over that hurdle, get them kind of practicing that talking about ethics and using some of these frameworks to analyze cases.
Peter, the methods for case analysis in research integrity, do they require the involvement of an ethicist, or can they be employed by non-ethicists?
You mean the methods that we identified?
Yes.
And we tested?
Yes.
I'm not sure that it is the special requirement of ethical knowledge or being an ethicist, but the major difference is not like this technical background, but the major difference is how long it takes to let you know how the process works. Because some of the procedures, although formal, but you need to go through several times in order to have a clear picture what will happen. For example, I just thinking back about my experiences when I started to use these formal methods, even very simple methods needs experience. 2-3 times with group discussions, because the group dynamics counts a lot, how people react, what is the time frame that it's realistic to use the case. A lot of different things become important in using this. So, but I don't think ethics knowledge is necessary for this.
Perhaps a question for both of you. Sometimes people criticize the tendency in case studies to focus on very exceptional phenomena. And this is said to be driven by the media that zoom in on what is salient and remarkable. And the result is that teaching ethics through case studies might have an implicit bias towards the bizarre and the outliers and very exceptional situations. Is there anything to this, and how can we work against this?
I mean, I think at least from my experience in engineering ethics, this is a problem, because in some cases the students think that ethical issues, ethical questions only come up in these rather extreme cases, whether it be like when there's actual research misconduct going on or whatever else it might be. I tend to use oftentimes fictive cases, because you don't find the little kind of day-to-day ethical issues coming up a lot in the media. But I think these are more powerful to show them, how ethical issues emerge when people are very well intentioned and things just happen. And they're more useful in that sense. So I think there is something to it. I do think looking at some of the more kind of bizarre cases are useful in some contexts, but I think a mix of the two is important to get the students used to the range of issues that often come up in this area.
Okay, I have a question in the Q&A, and it might be the last question given the time. Jonathan Lewis asks, there are so many different methods for analyzing cases in different contexts. Is there a way we can decide which are the most appropriate for specific purposes? Because the worry is that the application of different methods can generate different answers in real world contexts. So how to know which method is appropriate for which context? Peter or Kelly?
I would pass it to Kelly.
Oh dear, okay. I don't know, honestly. I think, I mean, I've used a lot of these, I've used some of these frameworks. I tend to use it not in real life situations, more in case study analysis. And they're useful in generating questions and helping guide the thought processes. Like one of the things when I was looking at Peter's slides is I like frameworks where they ask, what can we do to avoid this situation in the future? I think some analyses have some great parts and they may be weaker on others. And some you have to kind of look at a couple different frameworks to see what works. But I think if you're thoughtful, they're not, I don't see them generating wildly different answers personally.
Yeah, my response to Jonathan's question would be, in a method, case analysis method, I think it would be wrong for us to focus exclusively on the result. So it's a good result, a bad result. Case analysis is a process also. And doing the procedure, we learn a lot from each other, for example, in group discussions. So it's not the result where it's good or bad result or correct result, but also going through the procedure, which is sometimes the strongest aspect of case analysis.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm looking at the clock, and it's time to finish the Q&A. I want to thank Kelly and Peter. It was very interesting, and I hand over to Guy.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Peter and Kelly, for this last session, and Bert for sharing it, and also the session before this. Bert, Daniel, and Mariette, thank you for your contributions, and Mark, of course, in the first session. I think we had a very nice overview of, let's say, both things which are available on the embassy and can help research integrity world, but also nice ideas about what could be done more and how you could use them, and how we can develop further. Actually, looking at the group of people who spoke, we had some people from in our consortium and some people from outside. And maybe the best thing is also that there is not a real distinction between inside and outside. I mean, inside people have done a lot of work, and I cannot praise them enough. But outside people can use and can help us and can join our force. And that's, of course, what we're looking for. So thank you for today's presentations and discussions. We'll continue tomorrow with guidelines and guidance, and also with the future of the Embassy of Good Science. And hope to see you back tomorrow. I wish you a very nice, pleasant evening and a good night's rest, and see you all fit again tomorrow afternoon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.